Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. In the near future, on a decimated Earth, Paul and his twin sons find tranquility by day, but terror by night, when ferocious creatures awaken and consume all living souls in their path. When Paul is nearly killed, the boys come up with a desperate plan for survival, using everything their father taught them to keep him alive. Yes, folks, this is our raw reaction review for Arcadian. Luke, it's a Nicolas Cage creature feature. How you feeling about it? I'm super excited about it. This was definitely a nice surprise. I had no idea anything about this movie till I think 3 weeks ago. I think is when we got the first little blip or buzz about it. Like, who knew that this was going to be on the horizon? But you say Nick Cage and creature feature, you've got my buck. What about you?
I didn't know anything about it either until, I think you had it pop up on my radar. I still haven't even watched a trailer for this thing. You just told me it was a creature feature starring Nick Cage. And hey, I don't even need creature feature. If you're telling me Nick Cage is starring in the horror genre, I mean, sign me up. But you did tell me these were you said you weren't sure, but I think you described them as like furry little creatures. And I said, is this like Critters? And I was, I was hoping we were going to get some sort of Nick Cage Critters reincarnation here, but it was not to be, I suppose.
Yeah, it's not quite that. There are some dare I say critters elements to it, but in one facet. So, but when you saw the trailer, that was kind of like the money shot of the creatures. So, you got to understand that's where my head was coming from. And if when you see the film, if you've seen Critters, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Slightly different in the way that they orientate themselves, but it involves a large ball, is all I will say. Yeah, no, I was again very interested in this once the description came across Bloody Disgusting. I was like, yes, okay, Nick Cage, monsters, twin boys. Like, all right, let's do it. Let's see what he can come up with. He hasn't been necessarily. When was the last time he was in the horror genre for us? It's other than Longlegs coming up, he hasn't done a horror film in a minute. So I was really eager to see him jump back into this space. And obviously, when we're dealing with something like this, looking at the trailer, once the film starts, you get a lot of Quiet Place vibes from this film. I think that's probably the easiest comparison I can give, just with the tone and the setting of this film. But I personally found myself, as the film went on, enjoying this movie. I didn't love it, but I did find a couple elements very intriguing, very exciting. But overall, I would say that it's interesting. It's not absolutely blowing my mind, but I'm real excited to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, going into this one, I will say I think a lot of people are going to get excited about this being a creature feature starring Nick Cage, but you're not in for this a lot of cheeky fun here. This is a way more serious take. This is kind of a Quiet Place. That is the vibe that I'd probably say it matches the most out of things that a general audience has seen. Going into this one, I think the opening shot is really compelling. Was that a one shot? I'm not sure, but it's kind of, we have kind of setting the tone. And I love that we don't deep dive into the lore here. It's nothing like we're going to get into the specifics of exactly why everything's happening. There are a couple of, I guess, hypotheses thrown out there as to why these creatures are here on Earth, but there's really no definitive answer. And I like that idea where it's like, we set up a bunch of different avenues of lore, but nothing's ever confirmed. And those are my favorite kind of creature features, where it's like we don't have to really narrow that down and get granular with it. So I really love that element to it. And it's no secret, I mean, Nick Cage has twin sons here. So I love this familial element to it. I thought that was a rather interesting take. It's just a bunch of boys in their house hiding away from these creatures. I think, overall, I'm probably sitting where you are with this. maybe I thought I was going in for a little more cheeky fun than what we did get. This is a more serious take, and I think some of the elements are well done. And I will say, I think there's some storytelling aspects that did leave me wanting more. Maybe I don't want to say underwhelmed, but I think there was a lot of room for expanding upon it.
Yeah, I would almost say that there's not enough in a few spots here. There's a lot of things that left me kind of saying, why are we rushing so quickly through some of this? Why are we spending more time, doing certain things when I feel like we were better spent doing others? And I can't really say specifics because there is an element to this I don't want to spoil, but I was really concerned just by there being right off the bat, just kind of being a very lack of information on certain things. Like, I don't need a film to completely hold my hand, but like down to the basics of just like I know my wife and I had this huge debate throughout the film, was like, did he just find these kids, or are they his biological kids? I just was like, I was very curious. I feel like that was an element we could have explored a little bit deeper. It just really felt like a lot of this movie was on fast forward, which, it has, again, fun, exciting things that we're going to dive into in a minute here, but I just felt like there should have maybe been a little bit more time spent, maybe a little bit more added to the runtime, which it's very rare for us to say something like that nowadays. But I could have had a little bit more movie here, a little bit more meat to sink my teeth into.
I was on that same wavelength with you. I honestly did not get confirmation until, I looked at a synopsis where it said they're twins, and I was like, okay, I guess these are his sons. It does kind of move rather quickly, and I was still, I proposed that question as I was watching this. I wasn't really sure if there was actually blood ties there, or he just stumbled upon these two boys. And I think those elements where you look at a creature feature film like this, and this is a very claustrophobic, condensed kind of storytelling where we're on a farm, but we're hiding away from these monsters. And I think, that proposes a great element to dive deeper into these roots and expand upon this storytelling, really kind of understand the groundwork of this family. But I think it is skipped over a little bit because, we are left wanting, we have some questions that don't really get answers. I think, with this kind of element here, you have that idea or luxury almost to, we can kind of have these deep, heartfelt moments and then get right back into the terror with these creatures outside your door. And, I don't know necessarily that the film takes full advantage of that. When we look at Nick Cage, I think he's had some great performances over the past, I don't know, 8 years.
He's had a run.
Yeah. And, I think while he is able to show his teeth here, I don't think he gets that full kind of Nick Cage vibe where we're expecting him to fly off the handle. And then we also have Jaeden Martell here, which, is from the It franchise, as well as the Book of Henry, which I enjoy, but is not a popular opinion apparently. But
yeah, I love that movie too, man.
Yeah,
I think we're both in that camp. Yeah, we're by ourselves.
So I looking at it, and I didn't know Jaeden Martell was in this until he popped up, toward the beginning, and I said, oh wow, he's in here. And I think, he does get room to play, but it's not those elements that I was hoping for, where we're kind of sitting around a dinner table and getting really deep with our character moments here. We get some, but I think, again, we're left wanting more there.
Yeah, and I do have to say, I think that the boys, as far as like the twins go, I did find them both to be very likable. Obviously, Jaeden Martell is somebody that is very, I dare I say, seasoned at this point. He's dipped his hands into the horror genre quite a few times. He's also worked on films like Midnight Special, which I love, and of course has a smaller role in the film Knives Out. So it's like he's got a little bit more, I want to say, pedigree to him compared to his counterpart, who, I did kind of say out of the two, I felt like Maxwell Jenkins' performance was a little bit more muted. I don't necessarily know if that was an intentional choice or if that was something that just kind of happened naturally, which is odd because you kind of get more screen time with him out of any of the family unit. I think that he really starts to shine a little bit brighter as the film continues forward once we get towards the third act. But again, I just think like you could have fleshed him out a little bit more. You could have had him have a bit more of his personality shine through if we would have had more runtime. If we just would have had a little bit more to do than kind of what the film presents. They kind of give him one thing, and it makes him overall kind of not a super likable character. I mean, you understand it by some extent, but also being in the situation that you're in and in the world that you're in, it's kind of like, get your priorities straight, my friend. Like we've got to really buckle down here. So it leaves me in a bit of an odd spot with him. I don't think he's bad by any means, but I definitely think that out of the three, he's got the weaker elements to the trio.
Yeah, I just think, looking at the film and you're presenting this kind of creature feature, dystopian kind of world, it does leave this element for unique storytelling. And I feel like they gave, I think his name's Thomas, right?
Yeah.
They gave Thomas just kind of, a paint by numbers, their typical kind of story for a boy his age, I think, and I was hoping maybe they would step outside the box. If they weren't going to focus just on the family unit, and if we're going to introduce other characters, that it was going to be something a little more unique. But, it just kind of, I think it's more so a storytelling device where, we weren't really looking for that uniqueness, unfortunately. But I will say, those elements of what he is dealing with kind of bring us to for me, one of the more tense elements of the film. Whereas it's with Nick Cage and our character Thomas, where they're in this almost, I guess you'd say, I don't necessarily the den of these creatures, but there's a moment here where it's very, very tense for me, and I thought that was a great element. I think, when this film does those high tension elements, when they present those, they do them right.
Absolutely. And I think we can kind of, we've buried the lead quite enough here. How are these creatures? They keep them very vague in the trailer, and we're going to keep them pretty vague. But all I will say is that walking away from this film, if there's any major, huge praise I could give this movie, me being a creature feature fan, it is these monsters. These are very different than anything that I've seen in recent memory, as far as just the way that they act, the way they present themselves. It is so, I have no idea what these things are. I still sit back and I'm so curious. I want answers, because the film intentionally, I will say, it leaves a lot to interpretation. There's certain things that are said, there's certain stories that are sold that seem made up, but you just don't know. And the things that they do, there's a sequence involving I will say an arm that I absolutely adored. I was so shocked when that happened, and I thought that these were some of the most intriguing, ferocious looking critters that I've seen in a minute.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, where I love that they don't narrow down exactly what these things are, why they're here, where they came from, any of that stuff. It's just kind of this expansive lore to say, hey, dealer's choice of whatever you think is right, we can go with. And I absolutely love that, because I think sometimes these creature features stories get a little too granular with that, and got to narrow it down and explain everything to the audience. I think that element works well. The lore that they do bring to these creatures, kind of how they sleep, I thought was rather well done. Again, when they bring those elements of tension, there's a scene expanding upon the scene that you brought up a little bit later in the film, where one of our boys, Jaeden, Jaeden Martell's character is kind of, I guess, looking for a creature. And, I think those elements are really well done. The scene that you brought up, I don't necessarily get very vocal when I'm watching films like this, or in general, but I will say this was something where, and I'll be honest, every time that the creatures were on screen, I physically got up and stood closer to the television because I wanted a better look, and I was very vocal when that scene had come up with the arm kind of.
I love that you say that, because I did the same shit. I was like, what the fuck is this thing? Like,
they take their time. It's real slow. And the door creaking, locks, things like that. They use those audio beats really well, and it really just builds to that tension. Like I said, when this this film does tension, they do it right. And I got to say, they did treat
Yes.
these creatures right as well. I think this is probably going to be something as we move closer to the end of the year. This will probably be, as when we're talking creatures, I think this will come up at our end of the year discussion.
I really have a hard time seeing anything at least being as unique and just
Yes.
like really driving this need for me to get answers, and this me really wanting to study these things and try to figure out what are they going for, what exactly are these, because I swear to you guys, like, you will see these things, you'll watch what they do, and you'll see how they act and what they're even all they look, and there is kind of a I will say there's an element to them that it was absolutely mortifying to me when they before we saw them entirely, and it involves their face. You see something in the dark, and I thought, wow, they're really doing some creepy pasta stuff here, some really like cursed imagery on the internet tile kind of thing. But when you see what that is, and that at least gets shown to you, which I love, it's shown, it's not vocally explained, it is show don't tell, and I love it. I thought that was so smart, so unique. You could tell there was a lot of thought, care, and attention put into these creatures. And I will say, uh you know, as I know the Quiet Place films get a lot of praise, people love them, those creatures, the first film, they were interesting, they were kind of cool, but they are like generic bottom of the barrel aliens compared to whatever the hell these things are, and I'm making that claim right now. These are very, very interesting, and I, as a creature feature fan, you guys know I go crazy for that shit. I love these things.
Yeah. I'll put these up against any other creatures we've seen over the past probably decade. To be honest,
Very solid.
there's something in here. Again, we're dancing around spoilers, but I guess when they attack, that's very jarring and that you just never get used to. It's something.
What is that?
I have no clue, but it's one of those things that, at least for me, it made me jump every time. Like it was just like
Yeah.
it's something where you kind of get in your groove and I'm expecting this. Yes, you're expecting it, but it's still jarring and it gets you every time. And I just, as all the mayhem ensues with this, Dylan, you mentioned kind of a Critters vibe in terms of a big ball. Oh my gosh, I absolutely loved it. I did a double take when when something pops up on screen. I was like, "Did that really just happen?" And then
Right?
they come back to it. I'm like, "Okay, well, we're on this ride right now." And I got to say, regardless of I think maybe the storytelling in terms of the familiar unit leaves something to be desired. But I got to say, the focal point of these creatures and that expansion of that lore and what could be done farther down the line if we decide to jump into sequels or anything like that. I don't want this explanation. I just want to see these things back on screen.
Absolutely, and that's really where I sit with it too. I know my wife said the same thing. She was not into the movie at first, but by the end of it, she said that was actually really good. She liked it. She said that she appreciated that it was a simpler story, where I was debating her, saying I wanted some more. I wish the movie was a bit longer. And I think that as far as criticisms go, yeah, that does play into a bit of a big drawback for me. That does hurt the film in a sense, because I just feel like there isn't enough. But I think the fact that there is genuinely an interesting, unique creature that is going to bring me back to this film, this just crosses the line into a recommend for me. This is almost a worth a watch, because again, I just feel like the blandness and the shortness of that storytelling with the familial element. Not to say too much, but Nick Cage's character in general does get a bit sidelined, which I don't like to see. And I think that there's just leaves a lot to be desired story wise, but concept and creativity wise, they blew past my expectations. So it kind of lands in the middle there, but it does cross that line of recommend, because again, as a creature feature fan, they fucking aced that.
Yes. For me, if we take out that uniqueness of the creatures, this probably does fall worth a watch. I mean, it's that tier of proceed with caution as well, but injecting those creatures in here and how well done they were, this does just cross that threshold to be recommend for me as well. Looking at the cast, I was prepared for some really hard hitting moments. Is this the best usage of Nick Cage? Probably not, but it's necessary to the story. Jaeden Martell, I wish there was more there as well. So from a performance standpoint, I'm certainly left underwhelmed, I say, to a certain extent here, just because I wanted more with those characters, and they do present those elements to have those deep character moments. They just never really come to fruition. And then our Thomas character, again, just kind of bland storytelling by the book, nothing really unique there. But I got to say, the creatures save it. They did bring something unique, something different that we never see on screen here. So I hope, other horror directors, creators take a page out of Arcadian's book and kind of look at these creatures and say, let's bring something different to the screen over the next few years, because I think this is a great blueprint. So yes, for me, low tier recommend, but still a recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you. It's a mixed bag on the whole, but the elements that you want to work in this, I feel like, work completely in the most unexpected way imaginable, really. But I could see, just to be fair, because I know we'll get comments, I could see people, if you are not on board with the creature, again, this would probably fall into that low worth a watch, maybe even proceed with caution, like Luke said, because there's just not enough here. It's a mixed bag, but I did enjoy my time with Arcadian. Again, this is something that, because of those creatures, I will watch again, and it is a breeze to get through. Not gonna lie, with the fact that it is so light on everything, you can kind of just glide through it, and it would be something you can kind of throw on, and then once those moments come up and they're there, you can really laser focus in. That's where we're sitting with Arcadian, which you gotta say is going to be popping up on Shudder and limited release this Friday. So definitely check this thing out. I'm super excited to hear what you guys thought. And that's gonna wrap it up here for us. We got some fun videos out. I just saw Civil War. Really like that one. And Luke did an expert breakdown on the Maxine trailer. I really, really recommend that video. Dude, you killed it. Like, I'm not even gonna flex here. You absolutely crushed that breakdown. I love all the comparisons. Check it out. It is top tier stuff. That's gonna wrap it up here for us. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the horror shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live.